Welcome, everybody. We are here for the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, the GO Committee. We are here without our colleague and our chair, Nancy Navarro. We're going to try to make do without her. I'm filling in for her today, certainly not able to fill her shoes, but trying our best. We appreciate it. We have Dr. Torregas here, and we have a series of operating budget issues for fiscal year 23, starting with TEBS. And Dr. Torregas, if you want to introduce the team, and then we can go through the packet once you have.
Thank you very much. So we have the Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions Department, which I think is an apt description because they're providing solutions to across our enterprise. The budget recommended by the executive is $50,992,147, and my recommendation will be to adopt it in its entirety. However, before you do so, I'd like to focus your attention on two or three important issues. First of all, I'd like to thank the Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions team for being extremely responsive to my questions, and we have developed a strong relationship, which is very important throughout the year. Secondly, I wanted to recognize the fact that TEBS has been doing an extremely great job facing two big challenges. One is COVID and the pandemic, and how they've had to support every single department in the county and make that turnaround into 2022 to provide us digital support. And the second one is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has continued to increase in severity, and as a consequence, what they've been able to do is nothing short of amazing. In order to do that, they've done some reorganization, and that's included in my packet. But in order for you to better grasp the issues that lie ahead, I've identified 5 issues, and I've asked our CIO, Gail Roper, to focus on those 5 issues, and perhaps as she does so, after each one, you should ask questions if you have any questions, because they will frame the strategic imperatives and the outcomes of this $50 million investment that you're making. So with that as an introduction, my friend Gail Roper.
Thank you, Dr. Torregas. Good afternoon. I really wanted to start by saying what an incredible team I have. We've done a lot of hard work. We have very high expectations of ourselves, and we are really working towards making certain that the county's assets are protected. A part of that is, and if it's okay, Dr. Torregas, I'd like to talk about cybersecurity a bit. It has a lot primarily to do with not only the hardening of our network, we're making some technological engineering changes with the leadership of Joe Webster to harden our network and make a direct connection to the Equinix data center in Virginia, which is, of course, a level 4 data center, one of the more premier data centers in the nation. We're going to have a tunnel that will, an encrypted tunnel that will take us there so that we can actually protect some of the data that we feel has a high value to anyone who would want to do anything from the dark web. I would also say that that's only part of it. The engineering side is only a part of it. The human side is that we have to make sure that our employees are trained and that they understand those things that they can do themselves to protect the organization from any kind of cyber or malice. We've been doing a lot as it relates to bringing in tools that help us to understand and prevent the types of situations we've seen across the country and even locally. Part of that means that we have licensed software. You'll see some increases in our budget related to that. And then we're working on what we call a business continuity study. One of the things that is a significant issue when organizations are having a cyber breach or malware issues, or even in situations where ransomware is been put towards an organization, and that is having a better understanding of our systems and what kind of pertinent data are in our systems and what we need to really highly prioritize. So the business continuity study is going for the first time in Montgomery County's history is going through the organization to understand all of the applications in each department. What we're going to do with that information is begin to prioritize the systems so that when we get into if and when, and sometimes we say when because it's happened so often, but when we get into a situation, we'll be readily available to make the priorities to decide whether, and you'll be involved in some of this, decide whether we pay a ransom or whether we have other alternatives to bringing those systems back on board. So with all of those initiatives, the human side, the technical engineering side, and then understanding the catalog of applications within Montgomery County, we feel we'll be better equipped to handle situations. Digital equity, certainly.
For each of the issues, I wondered if you have any questions or reactions before we go to the next one.
I think we can move on to the next one. Thanks.
Okay. I'll move fast. It's Friday afternoon. Digital equity. So we've been doing quite a bit. I would, if it's okay, I would like Joe to just talk a little bit about the connectivity of underserved communities and where we are there. I think it's pretty interesting, and I also believe that it's moving towards our ability to provide connectivity, internet access to underserved communities and underserved children, which is one of the things that I think is most important. And then we'll talk a little bit about what that means to us as it relates to our systems.
Thank you, Gail. Joe Webster, Chief Broadband Officer. We have been very focused for several years in the county on digital literacy training with programs like Planet IT and training for senior citizens. More recently, in the last couple of years, really just before the onset of COVID and more focused since COVID, we've been also focused on providing robust broadband internet access to special needs and low-income adults, starting with the Main Street apartment complex here in downtown Rockville, and now expanding to residents on the lane, also here in downtown Rockville, which is low-income senior housing with Housing Opportunity Commission. And we're wrapping around that with a recent award of federal grant money for laptop computers, which will be available for low-income residents in the county. And we'll start distributing those in the next couple of weeks. We expect to have 20,000 computers available over the coming months from this federal grant. And then digital literacy training, so making sure when people do have robust access and they have the correct device, they feel comfortable getting on the internet, understanding how to do things safely, and how to utilize the internet for distance learning, telehealth, working, etc. So we're very proud of all of our efforts around digital inclusion, digital equity under Gail's leadership.
Appreciate that. I think Councilmember Katz has a question.
I do, and I applaud the initiative, and of course we've been trying, and I guess we've had some success over the years with it. But how does someone know that they are eligible? How do you get the word out? Obviously, many times we say, well, they can look online. Well, obviously they can't look online. So how are we getting the word out?
So two aspects for the internet access, MocoNet. That's very location specific. So if we serve an affordable housing complex, we make sure every resident is aware of that when they move in, before they sign a lease, etc. Regarding digital literacy training, there's been a lot of efforts to outreach to seniors and through Senior Planet IT and create awareness through community centers, through the rec centers, through different community partners. With regard to the free laptops, we are establishing a program where we use email, we'll have text messages, there'll be distribution centers at county resource centers and rec centers and libraries, and we're partnering with a lot of community organizations to get the word out regarding those laptops.
Well, but there again, if someone needs a laptop, they might not get email. So we have to go back to putting a notice on the library wall or whatever we're going to do. But we need to try to do it in every way possible.
We've had quite a bit of discussion with Councilman Rice about partnerships with nonprofits, being able to utilize the libraries and other entities. So we're really wanting to expand our partnership with not only the nonprofits but the private sector as well.
Good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Please. Dr. Tregas, you go
No,
first.
I just
and I'll
wanted to
chime in.
finish this idea that the next bullet, the customer service initiative, is exactly on that point, Mr. Katz. And Gail will focus a little bit on that next, because the executive branch is trying to understand how we reach all our residents for any issue. So we hope that in a few months we'll see some good results from that. Sorry, Andrew.
No, appreciate that. And I think there's, the couple next bullet points are talking about, to a certain degree, how we implement this, some of which is about learning from the pandemic, and I think it's point 4 about this idea of how do we, after COVID, use what we learned from COVID and make government work better, right? We were forced into some efficiencies here. And some of those are not great ways to do business, but we may do, and some of them are just better ways to do business that we probably resisted doing or perhaps didn't even think of doing. And now when opportunity was seized out of crisis, we were able to take advantage of it. And I think it is great to think holistically about how we do that across county government and throughout the enterprise. I am, that point 4 is a bit internal, what we learned about county government. And I think the interesting thing in this point is the question of what have we learned about digital access or lack thereof in the pandemic at a time when people were forced to connect only digitally? Did we learn that there were more people who had inadequate access to digital that we might not have otherwise known? How have we captured that understanding? How are we going to work through the reality of that and that knowledge? Just wondering if you have any thoughts that you could share on that as part of the digital equity efforts.
Absolutely. I think I was in the learning seat during that period of time. I will say that one of the things that we began to highlight is not only those residents that are technologically advanced, but those who are not. One of the stories that I like to tell is about the chatbot that we put in to try to diminish the 311 call so people could get through faster to get to registration and vaccinations. But when we went into that, we really were thinking that we would get to enhance those savvy users in the community. And what ended up happening was that seniors who had no technology were able to use the phone system. So one of the things I think that we learned is that we should really focus not only on millennials and younger folks, but also those individuals that are older in our community and don't really have the technological background. So that was a plus. What they say, a notch in the belt buckle around being able to help a portion of the population that we had no idea we would help. I would also say that one of the critical restructuring challenges for our organization, a technological organization, was to stop focusing too much on technology. We had to really start to think about what they call UX, and that really means like the user interface, and how we could better think through, reorganize, and address those processes that need to change. So technology, IT organizations have a history of putting technology in that doesn't benefit anybody except themselves. So what we're doing more is a change management approach. So we are actually looking at processes, re-engineering processes. We did a lot of that with the 311 situation during COVID, but we're looking really at ourselves as an organization that looks at the benefit and the productivity of re-engineering processes before we recommend technology. So our organization is structured that way. We have a very active change management organization that we're hiring more business analysts to kind of look at what benefits the citizen rather than what is the newest and greatest technology to come about. So those are some of the things we learned. I don't think we'll go backwards. National statistics tout that during COVID, the entire country has moved ahead almost 20 years with technology advancement because of COVID, not being able to touch people. And I can see that within our organization. Our two priorities going forward will be customer relationship management, our CRM initiative. But I don't think that it should be just one department. I think that could be some continuity across the organization for those front-facing departments that actually need CRM solutions. So we're looking at not a one-size-fits-all, but some sort of continuity across the board for whether it's a permitting department or whether it's 311, that we begin to standardize systems and practices around front-facing organizations.
Appreciate that. I think the other thing that we learned, and I appreciate, I was going to raise the older adult population,
Yes.
who are some of the most vulnerable during the pandemic, not just our hardest hit zip codes, but our oldest residents, both of whom had digital access challenges. And I think the thing that I learned during the pandemic that I hadn't really thought about when it came to digital access, I had always thought about this idea of digital access being an issue of internet access to a computer, et cetera. We were so focused on that. But there are plenty of people during the pandemic that had access to internet and access to a computer, but they worked a job that they weren't sitting in front of their computer all day. And so the idea that they could then sit and refresh to get an appointment was impractical and unreasonable and infeasible. And so I think when we think about digital access and these systems that we set up digitally, it's not just making sure that everybody has a Chromebook and MCPS, or that every senior or vulnerable resident has access to a computer and internet. It's making sure the process actually works in a practical way for people when they need it. And I think we really learned during the pandemic, perhaps we were thinking about this too literally and not in real life for most people, or certainly for many people. So I appreciate all of those efforts. If no other additional comments on this, I think we can move on to the next discussion item.
I think the last one is around centralization.
Yes.
So we're trying to be careful about looking at opportunities to centralize, because the impact of centralization sometimes means improved processes and more staffing requirements. So we're looking at those things that are important to us. Some of it relates to security. Having some standardization around departments buying equipment, making sure that equipment is capable of uploading all of the security applications that we need to protect the county's assets, and that we have some sort of agreement with those departments. Also, we're experiencing situations where a department will move forward on a particular technical project, and they haven't really done that on upfront work. So we're trying to step in as consultants and help them to begin to document requirements, begin to understand contracts better, those kinds of things. So we're in the very early stages of, I believe, of thinking about centralization, where it makes sense now, where we can help organizations so that we don't lose time on enterprise solutions, and also where we can add value to the project so that there isn't time and money lost. So being strategic, probably not moving as fast as we'd like in that area, but certainly being cognizant of the fact that we need to move more to a centralized environment.
With that, I just wanted you to know that starting on page 3, I've given you a display of the 4 new offices: Office of Digital Transformation, Office of Broadband Programs, Office of the CIO, Chief Information Officer, and Office of Strategic Partnerships, which make up the $50,992,147. With that, Mr. Friedson, I'm prepared to recommend approval of the budget as submitted.
Appreciate that. I think we have no objection here. Appreciate all of your work. I look forward to continuing the reorganization and getting updates on how this goes. And I'll just say that what strikes me is we're talking about technology, which is really the means, not necessarily the end, to providing services. And we're talking about the same things we talk about with everything else. We're talking about safety and security when it comes to cybersecurity. We're talking about equity and access, and we talk about the digital equity piece. We're talking about the next normal of how we learn from the pandemic and figure out the new way we're going to deliver services for residents. So it's refreshingly similar to all the other work that we're doing. So with that, you have an approved budget recommendation here from the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you both.
So I'm going to recommend, if it's okay with everybody, that we move to procurement and have them come in quickly, because I don't think it's going to take very long. And then we'll let them go back to work, because I'm sure there are plenty of goods and services that we have to procure here to keep county government running. And then we'll return to some of the other items with some of our guests as well.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, we're skipping around. As I mentioned, this is item 5 on the agenda here today. Dr. Torregas is here with us. We have Mr. Shetty, members of his team, and Office of Management and Budget. I'll turn to you, Dr. Torregas, then you can turn to Director Shetty, and we can take it from there if that works.
Very good. As you see on my packet, the Office of Procurement is recommended at $5,004,508 by the executive branch. And there are 2 issues that I wanted to make sure that the committee felt comfortable with before moving to a recommendation to adopt the level that the executive would like to see. On page 2, you see that there was a description of an embedded position program where 3 positions were taken from 3 individual departments to make sure that the procurement expertise was resident inside the departments. COVID had other ideas, and I wonder if Mr. Shetty could share with the committee how he plans to move forward, if at all, with this idea. I thought it was a great idea when it was first launched 2 years ago, so let's hear from the director.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, and thank you, Costas. We did discuss this idea of having a more center-led procurement environment in Montgomery County, where the Office of Procurement was more involved in the upfront decision-making when it came to the types of things we were doing. In fact, I was just at a meeting with the county executive where I was talking about things like make versus buy analysis, where maybe we could move certain services in-house rather than having vendors provide those services. In order for procurement to have that type of a proactive stance, we need subject matter experts. And in order to have subject matter experts who are actually engaged with what the departments are thinking about, we need those subject matter experts to be embedded within the departments. The plan had been to hire 3 individuals helping with IT, construction, and fleet, who would be embedded in various different departments, because you can imagine something like construction covers Department of Transportation, General Services, and even Environmental Protection and DHCA, and have those individuals not only understand what the departments are trying to do and allow procurement to be more helpful, but to also in some cases facilitate where there are just tactical delays between procurement and those departments for those things to get done. So these really would have been a win-win opportunity if not for COVID. What COVID did, unfortunately, is 2 things simultaneously. One is it moved everybody to telework, and it became really hard to bring people who you want to embed into other departments when the departments themselves are not actually constituted. And the other is it led to the great reshuffle or the great resignation or whatever you want to call it, but it's led to a tremendous shortage of the right type of talent. So earlier this year, I did embark on a recruitment effort. We posted advertisements. We tried to recruit for the positions. I was not entirely satisfied with the caliber of the individuals that we spoke with, and decided to make certain tweaks to how we went out looking for people. So what that leaves me with right now is I have spoken to DOT, where the funding for this had come from. They understood my situation. They still see the value in what we're trying to do. So our hope is now that, including my own office, we've all started to reconstitute here, that we will go out again and try to find these people. And I think it's in the county's best interest that we find the right people.
Should I go to the second and last issue? Or do
Sure,
you have any questions?
please.
The second one is a good news, bad news issue of performance metrics. On page 2, you see on question number 1, both the local small business reserve program, the local business preference program have really hit it out of the ballpark. The highest.
I just wanted to note that I wrote down that I was going to note that, so I appreciate you flagging that. But I think this is important, based on the work that the department has done working with the council together, and some changes that we made to policy and also to process. It's remarkable. More than a quarter of the available dollars going to our local small businesses and also to minority, female, and disabled-owned businesses. The most ever and the most in 20 years. That's, I think I have $129 million to the local small business program and $200 million to minority, female, and disabled businesses. That's serious money and real dollars that are being reinvested in our community. And I did want to credit you for that. That was a big priority of the council's, big priority of yours. And we're seeing the benefits of that. And I think there was a question of whether or not at a time of COVID and all the other challenges, whether we're going to be able to continue to achieve that when we're talking about global supply chains for all the different procurement that we were doing. And for that to have been able to continue, I think it's a really impressive foundation. And I know all of us are really excited and pleased by that. So thank you for that.
And for the millions who are watching at home, on page 4 is a URL that has every single dollar that goes out of the county for procurement. It's a tremendous report, many pages, hundreds of pages, but it does show the transparency with which this county approaches procurement. So I was glad to see that the 20 and 21 record of procurement are now online, available to anyone.
At the state, when we have the MBE program, we used to say a lot that, it's not just an aspiration. And we oftentimes set these targets, but we don't necessarily focus so much on hitting the target. It's got to be an expectation, not an aspiration. And I'm just really pleased that we're leading by example here.
Great. So very briefly, now comes the negative part. If you go to page 4, the table, it shows the last 2 entries, time to issue solicitation time frame, shows some worrisome degradation on both those accounts. So perhaps the director might want to focus on, the reasons for and the strategies taken to reverse this trend.
Sure. Yes, this is a pain point for me, and frankly more so for my team. We have 2 things that have led to a bottleneck. One was during COVID, a lot of actions were deferred or delayed or extended beyond the term because that was the right thing to do at the time. We were sort of blocking and tackling. But the problem is that work didn't just go away. We just kicked the can down the road when there was work that was already supposed to be happening at that time. So now what we're trying to do is double duty. We're trying to do the work from before and do the work for now. But what compounded this problem is that during the hiring freeze, our office was still seeing some amount of attrition, retirement, even a few people getting poached internally. But we ended up in a situation where at one point we had as much as 25% of the team just vacant. And that also led to a delay or a lack in processing capacity, which led to a delay. The good news is that over the last few months, we've been hiring very aggressively. I'm extremely excited about the caliber of individuals we've been able to hire. In fact, 2 of the 4 people here representing procurement are brand new to the office, and they're managers, and we're obviously hiring new staff as well. I am hopeful that we will actually get to even better than the pre-pandemic levels with the team that I want finally by my side. That said, I also want to be reasonable in setting expectations, and that these folks have to get trained. Our county's procurement is necessarily complex. And so our hope is to get through this with the right people doing the right jobs with the right skills.
Well, appreciate that. First off, welcome. Do you want to introduce our new team members?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very excited to first introduce to you Sharonda Baltimore, who's sitting all the way on the right-hand side. She is going to be our new central services manager, essentially the glue of our office, helping us expedite things like MPIs and whatnot. And then I also have Melissa Garner, who I poached from DOT, who is, apparently it's a two-way
What's good for the goose is good
Right,
for the gander
exactly.
in terms of internal poaching from departments.
Right, and you know, I called Chris to both thank him and apologize to him. But Melissa is going to be serving as our new operations chief, and frankly, this number that you see here around the time frame of solicitations is going to be something that she helps me address.
And we have Mr. Harrigan, speaking of poaching, who was poached from the BCC Regional Service Center, which we sorry to see you go from there, but happy to see you in this new role, which we certainly appreciate. I understand. I was going to ask how the vacancies relate to that, and obviously they play in quite a bit. It makes sense. The fewer people you have to do the work, the longer it takes to get the work done. And when you're in a unique, unprecedented moment like the pandemic, it makes it even more challenging. I'm just interested to know, in fiscal year 19, it was 6 months, and then it went to 9 months, and now it's at 11 months. Of course, 11 months is too long, 107 days. What is the target? Like, what are you looking to do? And then realistically, at what point do we think we'll be back to that target?
So, you know, and again, these are averages. They really depend on the types of solicitations that are in the hopper. If a solicitation is more complex, then the qualification and selection committee, which takes its own time to make those determinations, would take longer. And again, they should rightly take the time they need. But generally, when I came in here, you know, in the middle of FY 19, early really April of 19, so it was almost FY 20. I joked that it should take 9 months to make a baby, but not a contract. And that's it's kind of where we are right now, right? We're looking at even worse than that. So my hope is to bring us back closer to that 6 month time frame. I don't think that again, and that's assuming the complexity of certain solicitations. The truth of it is, like you asked, Director Roper, during COVID, we brought on e-procurement. So our processes are actually a lot smoother. In fact, the reason why we were able to still survive with 25% vacancy was because we had technology buffering us. I think we can do even better than 6 months, but again, it's one of those things where it's hard to commit to something because you don't know what contracts are going to be in the hopper at that time, and you don't know what the department's bandwidth and capacity is to process those. But my hope is to get to a place where it is definitely less than 9 months, closer to 6 months.
Appreciate it. Before turning to my colleague, I have two suggestions here. First suggestion is that we get a quarterly report, the committee get a quarterly report on effectively this chart or some version of this chart with the time frame, and then we can just track the progress and compare it to the historical average. I don't think we have to meet specifically about this chart, but I think we should get the chart and then determine whether or not it requires a meeting to discuss where we're headed. I'm confident that things are going to move in a better direction, but I think it'd be helpful for us to know so we can hold all of ourselves accountable. The second is, to your point, and Director Shetty, you and I have talked a lot about procurement. I used to spend a lot of time in procurement, really at like 1,000 feet of procurement, not in the day-to-day of procuring the goods and service mostly, but in the policy related to and the approval related to procurement at the Board of Public Works in my old job. And it's very clear that not all procurements are created equally. The Board of Public Works took the same 3-member vote on the $5 billion prescription drug benefit plan as a $100,000, administrative supply contract. Those two things do not require the same level of scrutiny and certainly don't take the same amount of time. They probably aren't going to be litigated and challenged to the same level, which also can hold up procurements. I'm wondering if there's a way to think about separating out, and disaggregating this number. I mean, it's important to know that our average procurement takes 6 months, but it's just as important to know that the super complicated ones are a reasonable time frame and the real simple ones are a reasonable time frame. And I'd imagine it'd be a fairer analysis for you all, and it also would be, I think, more useful for us to kind of separate that out. I don't know if there's 3 categories. I don't know if they're, and they're broad-based or if they're specific by the type of contract they are, and there's 7 or 8 or 9. I mean, I don't know what would be most useful. I kind of yield to you all as subject matter experts on this, but I think, giving some thought both in reporting, but also how we're reporting it and whether or not there's a better, clearer way. But I do think we need the overall to see the historical trend as well. But I think separating it out would be helpful if you could give that some thought as we figure out how we're going to report.
Sure, it's definitely something we can do. And to sort of go where I think you just stopped shy of it, we could look at things like the spend size, the dollar amount of a contract, the number of departments touching that, the extent to which it's cross-departmental versus one department, the complexity of the goods or services themselves. So there are ways we can do this. I don't think it's been done before, but it'd be a good idea for us to do that, because it also allows us to explain some of the information here. So thank you.
That'd be helpful, because the one-off contracts, obviously it'd be helpful to know that you can pull that off.
Right.
And also the ongoing regular contracts, it'd be helpful to know, how long does it take to just reinvent the process that we do every month, every 6 months, every year. I think it would be helpful. But now let me turn to my colleague.
Thank you very much. And mine is very similar. Is there an industry standard on any of this? I mean, how long does Fairfax take? How long does Howard County take? And not that we need to always say we want to be better than they are, but we want to be better than they are. So
right. No,
so,
there are companies that will do benchmarking of these types of things. The only thing that I say, and I was one of the people who was the company that did the benchmarking back in the day. But the one observation that I will make, and this is just in the interest of setting expectations here, is remember that some of those jurisdictions don't have the local preferences, the
Right.
minority, female, disabled, and each of those steps, each of those socioeconomic programs, while beneficial, also create complexity in our processes, and that they so it's never truly apples to apples, and it's been, since I've been here, we've never benchmarked with our peer jurisdictions. Sometimes, it's COVID again is one excuse, but sometimes it's also funny how close we are, yet we never actually talk to each other. But I will take that as another thing for us to do, and maybe Montgomery County can spearhead that effort of local area benchmarking. And so I'll take that on as something personally.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And I also think even if the number is, what is our tolerance
Right.
to say we want to do these creative things, we want to do these important things that have real benefit, but how much time are we willing to delay the procurement in order to do them? And, what is that?
Right.
What is that number? I think it would be helpful. So either way, having the benchmark, I think, is helpful. But thank you. With that, Dr. Tragus, anything else?
No, I'm ready to recommend approval.
Okay. Well, looks like without objection, we will approve this and send it over to the full council. Thanks for joining us, and have a good weekend. All right. Now we're going to go back to item 2 on the agenda, the DCM NDA. And we have Dr. Torregas here as well for that. And we'll call back up our TEBS director, Chief Information Officer, Gail Roper.
Mr. Friedson, the next 3 items are all non-departmental accounts, or NDAs as they're called. The information that's provided in the budget book for NDAs is usually fairly limited. So in my packets, I've tried, and TEBS has been extremely helpful in giving you a little bit more information about what's behind each of the requests. So with your permission, we're going to dive into the device client management, which is basically how do we get computers on the desktops and how do we get phones on the hands of our employees. You'll see that the request is about a 6% increase from last year to $12,999,985. It's primarily a contract-based service delivery mechanism by an outside vendor that does this for us, kind of outsourcing this process so we can get economies of scale. And there's information that I provided both on the PCs. You'll see on top of page 4 that we're on track to replace 3,000 full seat devices in this calendar year, and we want to continue to do that. What I suggest we do is to perhaps ask Director Roper to make a few remarks, and then I'll walk you through very quickly the key elements for this $12,900,000 item.
Appreciate it. Ms. Roper.
So I'll be quick, but this is primarily a catch-up for lack of investment in earlier years. So the refresh cycle for desktop units We were able to get funding last year and then this fiscal year, and so that we come up to a point where we have desktops on our employees in our employees' organizations that actually can handle this technology that we're using today.
Appreciate it. Anything else?
No.
All right, without objection, we will approve this. Let's move on to the next NDA, please.
The next NDA is the NDA for telecommunications, non-departmental account for telecommunications. The amount that's requested is $5,356,382, which is identical to the amount requested last year. I have asked a couple of questions there, simply, again, because of the dearth of information in the budget. And as you'll see on pages 2 and 3, it's a program that is basically bringing our telephony, the telephones we have on our desktops, current with the future. And the future is here. It's not something 20 years from now. It's already happened. So perhaps Ms. Roper might want to focus a little bit on what are the hoped outcomes for this future year in telecommunications. Where are we going, and what are the metrics that we're going to see coming out? Thank you.
So quickly, yes, we are moving our telephony solution to the cloud. As you all know, we've experienced some major outages throughout the last several years that relate to having an on-premise telecommunications solution. We are moving that whole solution in the next quarter to the cloud. Joe, you want to talk about it, the nuances, please?
Sure. So we have finalized a contract with a telephony cloud service provider, Avaya. They also happen to be the manufacturer of our on-premise PBX system, which is quite old. We are now doing the detailed planning for migration of the lines and the services to the cloud instance. And it will be a site-specific process. So one particular office building, one department will be moved to the cloud. Those lines will be decommissioned from the premise-based system, and then another site location department will be migrated. That process will occur over a period of probably 12 to 18 months, depending upon the complexity involved, at which point we'll be able to completely decommission the premise-based PBXs and be on a cloud solution only.
Great. Sounds good. Unless there are any other items, I think we'll take this without objection and approve it, send it to the full council. I just want to make sure the ITPCC NDA, that we approve that as well.
It's the next one.
Okay.
It's number 4.
Got it. Okay. I had them the other way around, but I just want to make sure we didn't skip that. No problem. So we did number 4, item 4 on the agenda. We're going to move back to item 3 now, which is the ITPCC NDA.
Until everybody was a technical glitch.
Yeah. Or this is me trying to count.
Everyone's favorite acronym, ITPCC, which stands for Interagency Technology Policy Coordinating Committee, is a very important structure that puts together not only each of the CIOs of our major agencies, the school system, the college, and so on, including the Montgomery County government, but also the chief executives of each of those agencies, and has them focus on collaboration in technology deployment. The COVID years have not been kind to ITPCC. The whole point of meeting and getting together and sharing agendas and sharing perhaps budget approaches to things have not been able to be carried out. When it was last in session, the Chief Information Officer, Ms. Roper, was the chair of the ITPCC CIO Council, and Mr. Madaleno was the chair of the policy leadership of the ITPCC. My recommendation is to adopt this very modest budget, but also to request that the GO committee meet with the ITPCC leadership sometime perhaps in the fall or winter of 2023, because I, as a professional in IT, think that it's a very unique platform that we should not abandon. at this point.
Appreciate that. I'll just note for those watching, this is $3,000, not $3 million. I know it's hard. You almost assume when you see the numbers on a budget that we're approving as a standalone that it be in the hundreds of thousands or millions, probably not in the thousands. I think it's a good suggestion, and I do think we have spent some time prior to the pandemic talking about reimagining what this collaborative, coordinated organization could mean across different agencies and departments. I think, Ms. Roper, with you now firmly in this new role for quite some time, all the changes that are happening within the department, revisiting that in this next normal new dynamic that we're in, I think would be really helpful. So if you could make a note for that, Dr. Tregas, for Chair Navarro to consider scheduling, I think that would be good. And I'll turn to my colleague.
I was just going to say, to your point earlier about procurement, for $3,000, sometimes we spend as much time on it as we do for many, many millions. So, yes.
With that, without objection, we'll pass on our approval of this to the full council.
Great. The last operating budget item before we go to the two CIP items is the cable television communication plan. This is a complicated one. On your at the end of your packet, you will find the detailed agenda and detailed budget for the cable communications plan. The total amount of the telecommunications plan is slightly different from the one shown in the budget book, and that I make that part of my recommendation. The budget book calls out for $15,227,385 for the recommended budget of the cable television communications plan. However, the full amount is somewhat different, and let me see if I can find it here. Here we go. The full amount, the full revenues expected are $24,300,000. So there seems to be some discrepancy. The discrepancy is explained by my friends in the budget office of TEBS. That is, they are showing the amount less two transfers. One is a transfer to the general fund, the other is a transfer to the CIP. I think it's a bad idea. As an analyst, I think the council should be seeing the full number, and the full number is $24,300,000 that you'll be approving the expenditure for, including the transfer. So you'll see on page 3, second from last paragraph, my recommendation to change that number simply as a visual graphic of what our general public will read as a cable plan number. With that, I'm prepared to walk down my packet page by page. There are about 6 or 7 things that I wanted you to focus on, and my recommendation would be to approve.
Sounds good. Let's go through that. But before we do, I think your suggestion of including the transfers is a good one, just to make sure that the top line of the budget is clear of what money is coming in and what money is going out. So I just want to make sure that there are no objections or concerns from the executive branch in doing that. Okay, so we'll send that recommendation. We'll clear the deck of that issue. We're in agreement with the council staff recommendation there that in the final budget that we reflect that. And let's move on through your discussion items. I believe you had 6, you said.
Very good. The first thing is if you turn to page 2, you'll see that in the next to last paragraph, the cable plan is guided by the strategic plan and operational efforts of the Connect Montgomery Alliance. The GEO committee had a meeting with the CMA just a few weeks ago, and you reviewed their plan. I wanted to make sure that this budget is in compliance with and serves the purposes of the strategic plan. Otherwise, why have a plan? So I've asked the question, and I've received very strong reinforcement that this indeed budget does align and support the plan. We have, I think, the CMA current chair is in the audience if he wants to say something about this alignment, and then we can move on.
Welcome to say something or to take yes for an answer, whichever you prefer.
Shy. He usually doesn't like to speak.
You need to turn your microphone. I know you're normally the one who turns the microphones on, but you got to turn it on for yourself this time. There you go.
I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for having me. I wanted to say something for a couple reasons. One, I haven't put a suit on in a really long time and a tie. So I thought since I dressed for the occasion, I should at least say a few words. We've worked really hard over the last couple of years as an alliance to do a number of things. One is make sure we're aligned and to get information out to the public in a different way. And so those efforts have really paid off for us with strategic plans, as well as implementing some things from those plans that have really yielded some really good results for us. Social media has become a big part of what we do. And what I think has really happened is that the PEG has really aligned in the sense that we're talking a lot more about how we can share content, and more so how we can share content differently to reach our audiences. One of the things that's in our strategic plan that's really important is that we brought on a operations coordinator, and already she's really made a big difference in our work. So we look forward to this coming fiscal year of her really being on the ground and getting us functioning at a high level, because I think we were already working well, but I think we'll work even better with the operations coordinator who's now in place. So we're excited about what's happened. The alliance is working really well together, and I think you'll see in the coming months a lot of really good things coming out of CMA.
We appreciate it. Thanks for your work and for dressing up for us today. Dr. Tregas?
The next point, if you go to the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3, you'll see that the two major franchises with Comcast and Verizon have been ended. We are in a continuing resolution of sorts with the two companies under the same terms and conditions until there is a new agreement. Without those franchises, the franchise fees that we get to support the cable plan would not be there. So as a consequence, it's obviously very important to negotiate strongly and to negotiate a good franchise agreement with those two major providers. I made a point in the top of page 3, and I've asked TEBS to make sure that the council is kept abreast of these discussions. The tradition is that the discussions are happening in the executive branch, and then the executive asks you for signature to agree with something that's already been signed by the franchisee. My suggestion is to begin some discussions early with the council and brief you through the GO committee on the major aspects of the negotiations in ways that perhaps what you hear from the residents of Montgomery County can be introduced and aligned. This is a practice that was there maybe 20 years ago, and there's no reason why we shouldn't restart that.
Appreciate that. I think it's a good suggestion. I'm seeing nodding from the executive branch that you're fully committed to doing that.
Very good. The next one is on page 3, the STAR one-time revenue coming from operating capital dollar swap. This is something I'm taking my hat off to the TEB staff. They found an opportunity to, in a sense, create money out of nothing. And if you'd like, they can give you some detail, but basically there was a swap where more money came back to us than left our budget. It was the kind of money, operating versus capital money, and there were some opportunities there. If you'd like, we can go into some detail.
Yeah, if you could just explain that quickly. I know that it's a partnership with MML, but if you could explain that briefly, that would be helpful.
Sure. So MML has a balance, a budget where they have excess operating dollars and not enough capital dollars. So once before, several years ago, we did a similar type of swap with them where we provide capital dollars to them and they provide us with excess operating dollars. So we agreed to a similar swap this year where we are providing $500,000 and in return receiving $1 million. So that is a swap that was agreed with both parties.
I'll turn to my colleague, Councilman Katz.
And I'm certainly in agreement with this. Though I did want to be pointed out that Gaithersburg is not a part of this agreement. Gaithersburg has though it's a member of the Maryland Municipal League, it has its own cable franchise. And the reason it does is because Gaithersburg had a cable franchise before Montgomery County did. And so that's how the history of it happened. Thanks.
That falls under the category, if you know, from former mayor, current council member.
And I
Cindy
misspoke.
Katz.
It's capital and operating are actually reverse of what I stated, so I'm correcting that.
Yeah, we can use capital dollars. They can use operating dollars better.
So,
Got it.
my
Okay.
mistake.
Sounds good. I see you were, we make sure we have the whole team in the room to make sure we get it right, which we appreciate. Well, that's great. We appreciate the partners at Maryland Municipal League as well. It sounds like that's a win for everybody and a positive for the county. So thank you for that. Dr. Regas?
One of the last points I wanted to make is that on page 5, you see there's an increase of $144,000 recommended for the outlay for MCM. And I requested some information why this major increase, and apparently it's labor negotiations that they're going through, and it's part of that labor agreement that they anticipate a certain percentage of rise. It was out of the ordinary, so I wanted to make sure that you were abreast of that as well.
Appreciate it. Any comments on that? Nope. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Anything else?
It's a very complex plan with a lot of stakeholders, and I want to agree with what Mr. Hudson said, that CMA seems to be working much, much better together. The coordinator is an effective position that the GEO committee approved maybe 18 months ago. We went for a search, and a good person has been found, and I think is making things simpler. And also, the last thing is kudos to TEBS for creating a special digital equity component in that cable plan. We never had it. We never called it that. So I think it's a great initiative forward, and I know that our chair would also appreciate it, as the two of you would very much.
And I believe we initially funded that in rescue plan funding, and then we're continuing that. Is that the case?
Yes.
I'm getting nods. So, all right. I was getting a little nervous that maybe I misunderstood that, but okay, good. My memory is still still strong. Well, I appreciate it. I think the bottom line is on the cable fund, the funds are diminishing because of the market dynamics that we can't control. The needs are not going away. In fact, with a lack of local media attention on local issues, in particular, the need for information sharing with residents is more necessary than ever, and the complexity of reaching residents is more challenging perhaps than ever, not just because our residents are different. They come from different places. We have 1/3 of the county that's foreign born. We have to be able to communicate in ways that folks can understand and want to access. And we're adapting to that new reality. And we've learned a lot during this pandemic of some of the ways that we weren't reaching a great deal of our residents. And we now have a strategic plan to try to do that and do it in a more modern way, a more cost-effective way, a way that we can actually sustain. So appreciate all the work that has gone into this. There's more work that needs to be done. There's a lot of change that is happening. We have to be able to adapt to that change. And I think the communication with residents is probably chief among that. So seems like we have a committee, a recommendation from staff, no objection from the committee. We will send this over to full council for approval as well. And I think that concludes our operating budget review. We have 2 CIP items, starting with FiberNet and then followed up with Ultra Montgomery. And I'll turn to you again, Dr. Trace.
That's correct. The CIP that was released on January 15th contained these 2 items, but the executive let us know that he was planning some major amendments. So the GEO committee decided not to take them up in the January through March timeframe, and now's the time to review those 2 items. The first one is FiberNet packet number 7, and the FiberNet program itself is funded at the level, or is requested at the level of $10,342,000. I wanted to make a very strong point that the executive finally has heard the pleas of the GO Committee. For 3 years now, you have been saying that the revenues in the cable fund are going down, and what are we going to do about funding critical services from the cable fund solely? This is the first year where the executive is, in fact, taking a hard line and a difficult one, and finding revenues on the operating side and from general fund revenues. I'm sorry, I misspoke. From general fund revenues to begin to fund the FiberNet from a different source other than cable revenues. This, I think, is a very, very correct decision, and I applaud the executive for doing that. There are several detailed descriptions of programs that you see, especially on page 3. You'll see a visual of the FiberNet investments in core systems, which show the process that TEBS is using to organize FiberNet. I would ask perhaps Ms. Roper to make a few remarks, but this topic is one of significance. FiberNet connects every single public building that we have, provides internet secure and fast service to our schools, to our college, to just about anything that touches our residents. So as a consequence, it's of vital importance. So I'd ask Ms. Roper to perhaps make a few remarks, and then I'd recommend approval.
The few things that I would say in regard to FiberNet is that it is an institutional network. It connects our buildings, and we've done analysis to determine what would it look like from a financial perspective if we were to utilize other private services. So we feel like what we're doing now is expanding not only the institutional network, but we're using that same network to provide solutions for digital connectivity. So I want to ask Joe Webster to talk a bit about that strategy. The one thing that I can say is that Joe has been adamant about expanding the value of this asset, because we know it's a big price tag, but it also can be done with it as we move forward. And I think that we're headed in that direction, and I think that we are very much focused on benefiting not only our core departments and facilities, but also the community at large.
Thank you, Director Roper. We have invested a lot in the last several years in FiberNet. We recently completed this past fiscal year an upgrade of the core network from a 10 gigabit backbone to a 100 gigabit backbone. We are now investing in upgrading sites and the connectivity and capacity at those sites and replacing older, outdated equipment. We're also extending FiberNet down to Ashburton, Virginia, and Equinix Data Center, as Director Roper mentioned earlier, where the internet lives, for lack of a better description, and we're able to access all cloud services, internet bandwidth, ISP services, et cetera, much more cost effectively and reliably than we can in Montgomery County. And we're using FiberNet to help expand digital equity services to underserved and unserved residents, again, low income, seniors, special needs adults in their homes. So through a combination of investing and upgrading and much needed overdue upgrades in the core infrastructure, we're supporting Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, all of our police, public safety, 911 center, et cetera. It's a critical infrastructure. We're also investing in cybersecurity and using FiberNet CIP to help increase our disaster recovery and cybersecurity and ransomware protection capabilities in conjunction with our services and co-location at Equinix.
In other words, it's critical.
Very.
A very detailed way of saying that it's absolutely essential to the work we do across all departments and agencies. The Ashburton Connection, could you just talk quickly about that? I'm aware of that. I know the work that had been done at the end of the prior administration that has continued on now. Obviously, that direct connection is helpful. We're in a regional and global world, and literally being connected as well as figuratively being connected is a real positive. Is there any applicability of that to partnerships with the private sector? I mean, clearly we benefit from it in the public sector because we're directly connecting the county government's core technology infrastructure into, for lack of a better term, as you stated, where the internet lives. But is there applicability to the private sector as we talk about recruitment and partnership of technology-based companies, data centers, other aspects?
There may well be. We have recently completed a contract with Equinix, and we have co-location space at this Equinix data center in Ashburn. There are 80 to 100 data centers in Ashburn right now. Equinix has about 12. And that co-location space allows us to place equipment there for our own use. We do have a little bit of space available that we could lease to other entities if there's an opportunity. And strategically, we believe we can leverage FiberNet to offer capacity, bandwidth, connectivity over FiberNet to commercial enterprises, government organizations, educational institutions, down to Equinix and down to all the services that are available there. So that's the strategic process that we're going through. We need to work through some questions internally regarding pricing and things of that nature, but that is something that's on the horizon for us.
Yeah, 'cause to me, the first piece is interesting. Obviously, it's space in a desirable location. We have extra. People need it. We can help them with that. That's great. And I'm all for that. But I think the second piece that you talked about, to me, that was always kind of the secret sauce to this whole effort, was our ability to leverage our size and scope and connections and literally connect and plug in to the center of the internet universe and then allow access points to other organizations. That gives us a competitive advantage to other places, and then we can benefit from all the other assets that we have in Montgomery County. We don't have where the internet lives, and as you described it, but now we essentially do, and then we have all the other things that make Montgomery County such a strong and competitive place for businesses to locate. So I'd love to be kept abreast on how that is proceeding. It's probably as much of a Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee conversation as it is a Government Operations Fiscal Policy Committee meeting. So maybe suggesting to the committee chairs. I happen to be the one person who could who serves on both. So humbly making that suggestion. And I think it would be helpful as you move forward with that to be in conversation with the key partners, Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and others, to think through how we can really leverage all the work that has gone in and use it to attract businesses, to help existing businesses, to grow the economy, because I really do think that this is an example where county government can benefit, but we can use our strategic opportunities to help and partner with other businesses that on their own might not be able to do that type of connection and might not be able to make that type of investment individually.
I think part of that is the conversations that we are beginning to have from a policy standpoint, legal aspects of, this is a county asset, what can and can't we do with it? But we are having those conversations, and that has to happen in order for us to move forward.
Well, let's take the culture of yes that we have found during the pandemic, at least in limited moments, and let's put some water in it, shake it up in the bottle, and let's spread it around. And let's use this as an example where we start with what we want to do and how we want to do it, and then we figure out how to get it done. I really do think this is something that should happen, that can happen, that needs to happen, and look forward to us being kept in the loop on that. All right. Well, there's agree to agree, the culture of yes on that. Dr. Tragus, other points?
Yes, I've noted that if you look at page 4, the first bullet under summary of staff suggestions is to continue to be briefed on this model of revenue production, partnerships, and so on. And I think your idea of meeting with Fed and seeing the economic development aspects is good. I think it's wise for TEBS to be seeking legal advice as well, because what we have is a government asset that some people may feel comes in competition with private sector providers of the very same service. So one has to tread carefully. But I think under partnership and with a culture of yes, everything can happen. So I've made note of that.
I've got faith that we can figure out a way, that there's a path forward here.
My recommendation is to approve the full amount as you kindly.
Well, without objection, we will approve this and send it over to the full council for their consideration. Why don't we go to our final item here, Ultra Montgomery?
Right. Ultra Montgomery is a program that began about 5 years ago, funded at a very modest level of $680,000 for several years. Under Director Roper's leadership, she's transforming this item to feed digital equity strategy. And again, I would ask Director Roper for a few comments on this before moving on to two questions that I had. Thank you.
Certainly. So I would say that it is exactly what we talked about earlier in regard to what we can do to benefit Ultra Montgomery to expand to the digital equity realm. And we're in the process of, branding a little differently as it relates to Ultra Montgomery, and finding ways that we can actually impact the community more than we have in the past. So that's really the ultimate goal here, is for us to take our digital equity initiatives and kind of put them in one pot, and then be able to do the programming and assess, collect data, so that we can report back to the council as to the success of what we're doing and the impact that we're making. I think there's lots of opportunity here to begin to have an agenda where we can explain the return on investment for this initiative.
Just very quickly, if you go to Circle 1, the display for Ultra Montgomery, you'll see that of the $5,315,000 expected to be spent in fiscal 23 on Ultra Montgomery, the 680 number that I mentioned before is the number that comes from the cable fund, but the balance of $4,635,000 is projected to be from federal aid. So this is one of the ways that we can absorb federal aid and put it to direct use for our towards our residents.
Yeah, just on that, could you just quickly talk about the state and the federal money and the 3-year schedule and how much we expect and what our obligations are in that and what this is going to mean for this program in particular?
Sure. So a lot of federal money is becoming available for broadband infrastructure. Almost all that is being flowed through state governments. So we've been working very closely with Maryland State Government and the Office of Broadband Programs and tracking the opportunities to apply for funding. We have actually applied for 6 locations, low-income housing locations, for matching state funding to help us expand and extend our digital internet equity services, MoCoNet, to some locations. We're expecting decisions soon on that, and I'm looking at Mitzi because she's been leading that effort. And we're very closely tracking and looking to leverage that wherever and whenever possible. A lot of it is geared towards rural areas that have no service at all, and we do have limited areas of the agricultural reserve, about 100 homes or so that we've identified, locations that cannot get broadband at all, and we're trying to address those as well. But some of it is geared towards digital equity in urban and suburban areas, underserved communities, underserved locations. So it is our hope to capture as much of that as we can, and we're very aggressively pursuing that.
Appreciate that. I understand that the plural of anecdote is not data, but each anecdote calls our office. I normally say each anecdote is a person and that person has a story, but they also call our offices, and I would just, I know we always talk about how there's about 100 properties in the agricultural reserve that lack access to broadband. Maybe that's true, and I'm not disputing that, but we hear this a lot, this concern of a lack of access to broadband, and it certainly feels like a lot more than 100 properties. And so I'm just wondering why we think that might be. I know it is a challenge. I spent a lot of time with Maryland Broadband and others, and some of the questions for why Montgomery County does not get more of this funding that goes to other parts of the state, and spent quite a bit of time on those issues and questions. But I actually think that somebody from Maryland Broadband is moving over to work at one of the main providers, and so perhaps that background will help and will cover our coverage area. But any thoughts on that, of why there seems to be a challenge and a discrepancy there? Because we hear it all the time from the agricultural community.
Hi, Mitsuko Herrera. Yes, so let me clarify. There are 72, 78 unserved properties that are occupied within the Ag Reserve, and Comcast has actually submitted an application to the state to provide service to all those addresses. In addition, there are several hundred properties that are part of the Connect America Fund 2 grant that Verizon received. They have until 2025 to build that out, but they've actually been connecting residents this year in the Ag Reserve. So when we say there are fewer than 100, what we really mean is there are fewer than 100 that are outside of the other grant area that has already been awarded. Because once you're in a grant area, you're no longer eligible for service through a grant from someone else.
So this falls into the issue that we've had in recent years of trying to encourage faster adoption and faster speed of deployment for those properties.
Yes. And we did do, we have on the Office of Broadband Programs website under the rural, we did do an analysis of this, and there's mapping data. We are actually working as well with the Office of Agriculture and the County Regional Services Center. We have an interactive map where people can put in their address and see that it's in one grant area or not. If they don't have service and they're not in one of those areas, then we want to hear from them, because there is some opportunities potentially to expand what's in the application right now. But so far, what's been, good and bad, is that so far the data people who have called in has been what we thought it was.
People who are in line within FY25 to get connected but aren't currently connected. Is that what you mean by in line with what?
The one thing about federal grants is that they do not require that companies provide updates to local government, and it's a flaw, because the people they call is your office.
Right.
But that said, the build out is going faster. I think in part because we have continuously pushed, and we've also tried to make a business case that if you build it, people will buy it. So there is build out happening, this calendar year. There may be some that go into next calendar year, but we're somewhat hopeful that a lot of these areas are going to be served sooner rather than later.
So they're legally required before FY25, but you think that they're moving at this rate based on added insistence and legally engagement faster than that?
Yes. Legally, they have until December of 2025.
Got it. Okay. Well, keep up the insistence. I will say this is a huge issue for a lot of people, a major concern. And if you could keep us updated on the progress and the timing, both in the federal grants, which I understand focus more on low-income housing projects that lack access to broadband necessarily than the agricultural areas, but also on the progress on pushing for the agricultural reserve in particular. I think that would be helpful. And with that, I'll turn to Councilor Katz.
Yeah, and just so I understand, with the federal grants, the individual who is being connected to cable does not have to pay for the line to run to their residence? How does that work?
So one way of looking at the grants is it depends on the rules and it depends on what the applicant asked for. Mm-hmm. As we understand it, in the Verizon grants, Verizon asked for funding all the way to reach the door. Similarly, Comcast asked for the same. And in practice, what we're finding is that residents are reporting that they're getting service and they are not being asked to pay additional line extension charges from the road to their to their house.
Good, because at one time that was really part of the issue, is that somebody can be a mile off the road and they had to pay for the line. So that's good, very good.
Okay, well, thanks for that update. It's obviously really important. It is a good way to cap off this conversation because it's about all the other things that we're doing. If people don't have access to appropriate high-speed internet, then the rest of everything else that we've done is not nearly as meaningful. So appreciate the commitment that we have undertaken. I think we have doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on it over the last 2 years together, and really appreciate all that work. And certainly we need the federal government, we need the state government, and we need the private sector to step up as well. Several of those have, some of those have not as much as we would like, and so we're going to keep pushing. Dr. Tragus?
That completes your discussion. I think at the level of $5,315,000, the recommended budget is moved for approval by you.
Okay, without objection, we will approve that and send it over to full council for their consideration and approval, and appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoys their weekend and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks very much. We're adjourned.